We're here to celebrate you today and the web evangelism that you've been carrying out in your various communities, leading in innovation, growth, prosperity, and showing how the web can be a great tool for this growth in your communities.
My experience at the Accelerate with Google Summit has been absolutely fabulous. It was a collection of both local and national thought leaders in diversity, as well as thought leaders in technology.
So the summit's been great. I mean, it's brought forth people from various organizations from across the country to share their ideas, to see some of the things they're doing in common and see what they can learn from each other. So it's been a great day of information.
Today, we're proud to work with 75 partners who are impacting entrepreneurs in over 115 countries. A few of our partners I see in this room. And the outcomes that we're able to achieve together, we believe that diversity can't happen in a silo. It has to happen across our entire global network.
I love seeing a lot of partners, a lot of Googlers that I work with online to finally see them and touch them. I love that.
I've met presidents and CEOs of other minority-focused business associations. I've met national business association presidents. I've also had the opportunity to hear today from the CFO of Google, which was really a great experience, really just to hear from the top.
Google is just not a conventional company. Inclusion is inclusion. It's not a quota. It's a mindset.
The CFO of Google was great. It's interesting to see what he said about the fact that everyone has a diversity story.
There's actually a diversity story in all of us. And that's the really fundamental issue. And in fact, our responsibility is actually to turn this completely upside down, to make it completely blind. It's all about celebration, not exclusion. And these are the principles by which we run at Google.
A diverse organization is going to solve problems better, we're going to be more innovative, and that's the lifeblood of Google. It's critical for us to stay relevant.
It starts with all of us. It starts with mindsets, and it starts with thinking big.
If we look at the data, we can consistently understand that diversity always leads to better outcomes.
I hope that with just these few words, I give you a sense of the optimism that's at Google, our values, and our ability to think big.
In a very nice way, gave us the big picture of what's happening at Google. And as an entrepreneur, to see a large company like Google do stuff at grassroots levels was very encouraging for us.
My favorite part about being an Accelerate with Google partner is just how much love Google shows to its partners. I mean, it's really just been an amazing experience, and it's great to be connected to such an innovative company that really wants to work to bridge the digital divide, connect with minority communities, and do so in ways that many companies might not necessarily be willing to go that deep into your organization.
At the summit, I've learned how Google makes it a priority to work with partners. Now I know that we can bring other partners within our community to come and work with Google and, amplify that message to their own respective communities.
I've learned that there's a lot of organizations out there really focused on educating different audiences on the power of technology and growing their business and growing their lives. And it's given me more encouragement to continue to do what I'm doing.
What we can be doing as evangelists to really help connect people to the web using Google applications and using Google products that are really important for us to be able to take these organizations and individuals to the next level.
This is how it starts. It doesn't need to be tens and tens and tens of thousands. It starts with people like us, and we can make a huge difference.
One of the greatest things about being able to leave here this afternoon and to go back to our community is that the programs that we learned here with Accelerate through Google Partners is to be able to make sure that the technology is now leveling the playing field.
Every small, medium business, which is the real heart of so much innovation, with the right tools can be incredibly successful. The whole world is yours.
We are walking away not just feeling up for today, but really committed to what we're going to do next.
this afternoon's panel session titled The State of Latinos in California Business Section. I think you're in for a real treat this afternoon. But first I want to just make mention that this session is being live streamed by Google. And you know, we encourage you to try the Google Plus Hangouts and the host of other terrific products they have online. I'm very proud of their support of this session. So to all our online viewers, just want to say hello, and we're glad you're with us. You know, we're really happy to be here in San Diego and have this panel filled with some really renowned experts who are going to delve into the topic of the state of Latinos in California. When I looked over the panel session that was put together and I saw some of the names, I said, wow, this is truly an all-star panel of keynote speakers in their own right. And as I kept reading the names of these speakers, I see Arturo Vargas, who was actually our keynote for lunch last year. So welcome again, Arturo, for being here. And I think you all are going to be in for a treat. And so before we get started, I do want to recognize the sponsor and one of our corporate members of this session, General Motors. Woo! Yeah.
That's Alma. That's great.
I love it. So that's Alma. I have to give Alma Crosby a shout out over there for all her support. So I actually tried to convince Alma as one of the corporate giveaways to give away a car. And she says no. She goes, Jason, you're going to have to settle for a attendee badge. So,
Pardon me? Oh, I
so
think
we'll
so.
take the attendee badge, Alma. We appreciate it for your support.
I like it. Unobtrusive.
So without further ado, I want to introduce someone who's here on behalf of General Motors, Mr. George Velez, to make a few remarks. And before he steps up, I do want to share a couple words about George. George is GM's global process leader for information technology. George has been with GM since 1984, where he's held several positions with the GM legal staff in the antitrust, personnel and labor relations, marketing, and commercial practice areas. He currently coordinates legal support for the information technology function and is also responsible for supervising antitrust matters. So I did a little homework on George. I love when I meet sponsors from the automobile industry to see what they drive. So he does drive a GM product, a Cadillac. So without further ado, I'll invite George to the stage.
Thanks, Jason. You know, the problem with addressing you at this late stage, even as just a sponsor, and I feel a little badly for the panelists because, you know, we've got half the audience that we had here this morning. I had suggested to my friends from Toyota and from Ford that they put vehicles under the seats so that we get more people here. Obviously, they didn't follow through on that. I had some prepared remarks that were put together for our chief diversity officer who was not able to be here with us. And so you get me instead. Let me tell you a story, true story, by the way. There's this transcript that I'm not going to read to you, but I'll tell you about it, right? There's a personal injury criminal trial going on, and the plaintiff's attorney has a scandal witness, a star witness, and he just testified that the defendant bit the ear off of the other guy, right? And so the defense attorney gets up and he says, now, you testified that you were present at a fight where these two guys got into fisticuffs, is that correct? Yes. And you saw them exchange blows, is that correct? Yes. And then you claim that my client bit the ear off the other guy, is that correct? He says, yes. And he says, did you see him do that? He said, no. He said, yes, that's correct. He said, you testified that you turned away just as the incident happened, is that correct? Yes. So you cannot sit here and testify that my client bit the other guy's ear off, is that correct? He says, yes. He says, then how do you know, how can you testify that you did that? He says, I didn't see him bite him, but I saw him spit it out. So I'm not going to, so my prepared remarks all talk about how important the Latino consumer is to not only the automobile industry, but to the entire U.S. And repeated some statistics that we've heard 16 times today, right? So I'm not going to repeat those for you. It also talked about the commitment of General Motors to HACR. We've been sponsoring them for 16 years. And the fact that we have this many of you with us still for this 22nd Symposium speaks a lot about the great job that HACR has done and one of the reasons that we continue to sponsor them. So again, I'm not going to repeat all that stuff. I also do want to, however, express the fact that General Motors continues to have dedication and support for all of the minority initiatives that we've started. We were the first OEM to begin a supplier diversity program back in 1970, and then a few years later, we started the dealer development program. We now have 107 Hispanic dealers, and we know that it's important for people to buy vehicles from folks who look like the way they do. We've learned that lesson, and so we remain committed. As a final thing, I did promise, well, no, let me tell you, one of the other trademarks of Detroit, we have these sweatshirts that say, Detroit, where the weak are killed and eaten. And so Andre told me that if I didn't put a plug in for him, that was going to be my fate, right? He's going to leave me dead in downtown Detroit. So I wanted to plug Andre in, who's coming in from Detroit to talk about Latinos in California. And I asked him, well, what is it that you're going to talk about? And what is high tech? He said, well, we make bionic Latinos. So I'm very interested to hear what you say about that.
Yeah, that's great.
Keep it all out of his head.
That's good. That's funny.
Excellent. Let me give another shout out to General Motors, who's actually our newest visionary sponsor of the Corporate Executives Forum. They just made a $50,000, the GM Foundation, made a $50,000 donation investment in the Corporate Executives Forum, and we were pleased to have George and Alma there this weekend, so I'm sure they had a great time. Looking forward to hearing more about that. So I'm going to introduce our moderator for this session, who I had the privilege of meeting last night, along with several other Telemundo and Comcast team members, I would say. Her name is Blanca Garza, and she is a co-anchor at Noticiero Telemundo 48 at 6 p.m. and 11 p.m. She has 20 years of experience in journalism and television, and joined Telemundo 48 in 2001. Throughout the years, Blanca has been awarded several times for her professional success and commitment to our community. In 2011, she was honored by the California State Senate for her outstanding service to the Latino community. I could go on and on, but I want to hear from her, and so do you. Can you please join us?
Thank you, Jason. Hi, everybody.
Hello. Good afternoon.
It's a pleasure being here. Oh, yes, I have this little tool here that I'm going to use because we're going to be here for a little while. Hold on. Here we go. It's a pleasure. Thank you, HACR, for inviting me and letting us be a part of this amazing event and this panel that we're going to enjoy and learn so much from. As Jason said, Blanca Garza from Telemundo Channel 48. I've been there for 13 years. I was born here in California, raised in Monterrey, Nuevo León, and then I came back to the States when I was 18, so I started really, really young in my career. And my grandfather came to this country with a Bracero program, and as a farm worker. My dad and my mother was also farm workers. And so all I can say is that I could also be in the fields if I wanted to. I had other dreams, and I accomplished them. I still have some more to accomplish, but so far so good. I couldn't be happier to be here in San Diego. Thank you so much for having me. I'm gonna introduce now our panelists. First, we have Andre Arbeláez, is the president of the Hispanic IT Executive Council, HACR. HACR's premier network spans the Americas and is focused on building stronger technology and executive leaders, leadership teams, corporation, and role models in a rapidly changing, flatter, and information technology-centric world. Congratulations, and please join us in this panel, Andre. Thank you. Now, Helen Torres is the Executive Director of Hispanas Organized for Political Equality, HOPE. Ms. Torres has over 20 years of alliance building, community relations, marketing, and fundraising experience and expertise. Prior to joining HOPE, Ms. Torres was a community relations officer for United Way of Greater Los Angeles. Her major responsibilities included recruiting volunteers to assist in resource development and the creation of a community-based programs. Welcome. Arturo Vargas is the Executive Director of the National Association of Latinos, Latino elected and appointed officials, a national membership organization of Latino policy makers and their supporters. Arturo also serves as Executive Director of Naleo Educational Fund and an affiliated national nonprofit organizations that strengthens American democracy by promoting the full participation of Latinos in civic life. Arturo, bienvenido. For more than 20 years, Diana Campoamor has grown a small network of funders, Hispanics in Philanthropy, HIP, from volunteer group of advocates into a transnational philanthropic network, HIP, which now numbers more than 600 funders in 5 regional offices, has awarded over $30 million to build a capacity of Latino-led, Latino-serving nonprofits in 19 sites across the U.S. and Latin America. Ms. Campoamor has served on a number of boards, including the Council of Foundations and Independent Sector. Bienvenida. Fidel Vargas is President and CEO of the Hispanic Scholarship Fund, the nation's leading provider of scholarships and serves designed to give Latino students full access to the opportunities a college education can provide. He has served on numerous public and private boards and on the Commission on Presidential Scholars under the President Bush and Obama. He is currently on the board of California Community Foundation, the Latino Donor Collaborative in the Los Angeles Theater Center. Welcome. Let's get comfortable. From immigration reform to the reduction of SNAP benefits and other government programs, and for an increase of minimum wage to access to affordable health care and housing, Latinos are at the center of many hot debates in the political arena. Would you agree? Right?
Yes.
The theme of the conference is the state of Latinos. In your opinion, are we at a place where we need to be, or do we need to catch up? What do we need to do to catch up, and most importantly, what do we need to do to be ahead of the game? Who would like to start?
Sure.
I feel like we're on Jeopardy.
I'll go first. I'll be happy to. Just for those that are not familiar with the organization HOPE, Hispanas Organized for Political Equality, we're a statewide organization here in California. We're a leadership and advocacy organization on behalf of Latinas. We have 2 major programs. We have our HOPE Leadership Institute, which is a leadership program for Latinas who are already in the civic engagement space. And they go on to do great things in our community. We have over 422 graduates. 45 of them are elected officials. We have over 300 of them serving on nonprofit boards, and close to over 200 on statewide appointments and commissions. And I want to give a couple of shouts of gratitude. One is in the audience is Carrie Lopez, who is the mastermind and the architect of the HOPE Leadership Institute. So Carrie. And then, of course, one of our great sponsors, Lydia Martinez, is one of our champions as well as Arturo Vargas is one of our champions. So to put this in context, when I think about the hot debates that Latinos are involved in, I often think about great organizations like NALEO, who really are there when it comes to the civil rights and the voter rights as well as immigration rights. And then we have some other great organizations that look at it from an educational lens. But what I want to speak to a little bit is one of the reports that HOPE has done around the economic status of Latinas. and one of the hot debates that we're not a part of, that we need to be a part of, not only here in California, but also nationally. And that's when it comes to the economy in a strong way, but more importantly, and get ready for this, this sounds going to sound really sexy, tax policy. And why I say that is because, I know it sounds cool, doesn't it? And the reason I say that is because if you're an advocate in Sacramento or if you're an advocate in DC, it's all about the budget. And it's all about revenues. And I think us from individuals from corporate America understand that. And so most often you see our advocates coming from nonprofits and groundswells of great community movements, but we really need our corporate Latinos and Latinas to get involved in this finance conversation and really make that a hot debate for the Latino community. Because at the end of the day, it is about the money. And it's about us being representative in those conversations about how our taxes are being spent and what taxes should we be collecting. And I think for my perspective, because I know you have a great panel here that will speak to immigration, to education, to those key things, but we need more Latinas talking about tax policies. We need more Latinas advocating from a financial standpoint in our government, and to ensure that we're strong in that perspective as well.
Thank you, Helen. Who else would like to talk about if Latinos here in California are where we need to be, or where do we need to be?
Love to take that on. Are we where we need to be? No. Are we going in the right direction? Yes. Do we need to catch up? Absolutely. And I'm speaking here just about the political environment. Surprise, surprise, right? I'm going to talk about politics. Where are we as a political community? We're making a difference already. You know, California is where it is today on the map politically in this country because of the Latino vote and the changes that Latinos have made to the statewide electorate in the state. But we're not nearly where we need to be with respect to our representation of the population. We now become a plurality of the state's population, meaning we are the largest ethnic group in California. And we are the second largest ethnic group among the electorate. In this year's election, we'll be about 29% of all eligible voters. But let's not kid ourselves. In terms of voting, we are underperforming as a community. As much as we'll get up and talk about the power of the Latino vote, and I'll be the first one to do that, and I'll get up and I'll talk about how the road to the White House goes through the barrio, and how you cannot win a statewide election in California without the Latino vote, just ask Meg Whitman. All of that is true, but we're not performing where we need to be performing. When 51.5% of every single Latino and Latina who could have voted in November 2012 in California didn't, we're underperforming. We have lots of work to do, and there are a lot of fingers that we can point. We can point at a system that discourages voting. We can point at a system that does not make voter registration easy. We can vote at a system that does not make it easy for people to show up on election day and vote. But I also think we need to point the finger at ourselves and hold ourselves accountable as a community for not performing. Now, it's all going to come eventually in terms of just sheer numbers and sheer momentum and force. I think the biggest challenge is going to be, are we going to be ready as a community to lead this state? That's our challenge. We will be electing Latinos and Latinas as governors, as U.S. senators, and other statewide office, and continue to elect them as mayors of the largest cities and to run the counties in this state. What are we going to do with that political power? What are we going to do with the public policy authority at our hands when we acquire it? That's the question that faces us. We have an inkling of what we can do. And I'm very proud of some of the role that Latinos and Latinos had in our state legislature in turning the state around financially. But how do we grow the state? How do we grow the economy? How do we make sure this state continues to be the golden state for our children? And our children are Latinos in this state. So I think that's the real challenge.
I'll go next. Fidel Vargas with the Hispanic Scholarship Fund. And is Frank Alvarez in the room? He's taking a nap. So a shout out to the interim executive director, president of HACR, Frank, as you know, was my predecessor at the Hispanic Scholarship Fund. And for those of you who may not know who we are, first of all, is there any HSF scholars in the room? Raise your hand. Okay, we got a few. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, good. HSF, since its founding in 1975, has awarded over $430 million to over 60,000 of the best and brightest Latinos in the country. I say that because I'm one of them. I'm a 6-time recipient. And it's interesting, as Arturo knows, I was elected mayor of the city of Baldwin Park. I was the youngest elected mayor in the country at the time. And that was the year of the Latino, and that was 1992. And one of the things that I remember very distinctly from that campaign, in fact, the Governor Clinton came to Baldwin Park. I think you remember that. He campaigned there, and he gave a speech about education, and it was a very, very compelling speech. And then fast forward to 2008, and I was at the NALEO conference, and Senator Obama gave a speech. And I said, where have I heard this before? And I heard almost the same exact speech back in 1992. So I agree with Arturo. We're not where we need to be, and we're going in the right direction. And I think the key to, and this is the debate. The key is, what are we doing to the structural issues that are the impediments to our young people? I heard a horrific story about the reduction of standards in Texas as an example of something that could be viewed as insidious. Because why are we lowering standards for our young people when we should be raising them? On the other hand, as the president of the Hispanic Scholarship Fund, I get to see all the good stuff, right? For me, the glass is half full. I see 3.9 million Latinos in college and challenged every day by how much more money can we raise so that we can make sure that we fund as many of those students as possible. That Latinos are now 17% of universities. Now, I could have someone here in the room probably tell me, well, they're all going to junior college, which isn't true necessarily, or they're having trouble graduating, or all those things are true. And so I think one of the things, and I know that Arturo is doing this all of us are doing this at our organizations, is we've identified the problems and then are looking for the solutions that can have the most impact. And I think that's the thing with the elected officials that I have conversations with and with what we do, to recognize sort of where we are and then look at the things that each organization and each of us individually can do to begin or to continue, because this has been an ongoing process. And I think the continued wave of both immigration and our own sort of demographic trends because of our birth rates are going to require us to really focus on this quickly. It is, when you look at where we're going to be, as 30% of the labor force in the country and almost, I think it's 40% here in California alone, those are challenges that I think we need to take on and do it in both individually and as organizations, and then hopefully collectively as well, working together.
Thank you so much. If anybody would like to add something else, or I'll just go ahead and change the question.
I'll jump in. At the Hispanic IT Executive Council, we actually represent the end of the path in the aspect of from education to successful careers, particularly in technology. And I talked to a few of my board members in preparation for this discussion. And it's, for them, it's not about representation, it's about education, which is a key driver for them to grow to be in fields of technology where they can go in right after college and start making $70,000, $85,000, $100,000 a year. And and there's a lot of opportunities out there in the technology world for these Latinos to get into, but they're just not going into schools fast enough to do that. That's why you have such a prominent outsourcing model going over to India and other countries. And it's our responsibility as Latinos to take care of our own. So we constantly have to push education in the process. You talked about tax policy. I think somebody last night referred to the current governor as Moonbeam Brown. and in the aspect of because there's more taxes being put on the state of California going forward. And this is my shout out to Detroit because we'd be happy to take you there. The cost of living particularly in the areas where I represent, particularly in Silicon Valley, is just tremendously terrible. For $500,000 in Silicon Valley, you're lucky to get a 2-bedroom, if that, studio apartment, and if you're lucky, a covered garage. Where I live, in a very nice suburb of Metro Detroit, on a lake, you can buy a 5,000 square foot home with 6 bathrooms and enough money to buy a pontoon and a ski boat and still have change left over. 500,000. You can do a lot. And so now with technology being so virtual, you can really be anywhere. So it's a combination of education, tax policy, and lifting each other up and be inspirational to really help drive successful individuals within the Hispanic community.
Great. Well, let me ask you a question. First of all, Carlos, a shout out to you,
yes.
For this organization. Aplausos. And to Frank and to all of you. How many of you are involved in philanthropy? Raise your hands. All of you. Everybody. How many of you, when you think about philanthropy, think philanthropy and Latinos? Very few. Very few. In fact, I think, a few years ago, it was almost like an oxymoron, Latino and philanthropy. Yet, in this state, and we're very far from being where we need to be, for all of the reasons that have been cited here, foundations are giving very little money to Latinos, to Latino-led groups. Now, that being said, California leads the country in giving to Latinos. So we're doing pretty well. The trend is starting here. And all of you who are philanthropists are redefining the narrative of what leadership and giving is. We just celebrated 30 Latino givers that include, and I'm going to name some names, Arnoldo Avalos, who was employee number 500 at Facebook, Carmen and Al Castellanos, who won the lottery, and guess what? They established a foundation. It's their own money. Lourdes Miranda from Puerto Rico, who was a Beltway bandit, by the way, in Washington, D.C., made a fortune as a Beltway bandit doing consulting for the U.S. government, retired in her 50s, got on the board of Amnesty International, and became a human rights leader on her dime, not someone else's dime. Those are stories that I think it is important for us to tell. Because as Arturo was saying, we can point a lot of fingers, and there's a lot of solutions. But I think it begins with us, with our redefining ourselves as the givers that we are, and telling each other stories with names. These are the stories of our families. These are the stories of, Cesar Millán, who is one of the most celebrated Americans and who's a philanthropist. And the folks who are not celebrities, folks like you and I. So the question becomes, yes, California is in a good place. Places like, for example, there's over 8,500 foundations in the state of California. Of those, more than 20 have substantial programs. That means, 100 payouts of 100 million and more. They have greater diversity than most foundations across the country, and it makes a huge difference. It makes a huge difference. A foundation like the California Wellness Foundation that unfortunately had a Latina, an amazing, enlightened Latina as a CEO for a short period of time. That foundation, is investing almost 40% of their funds in Latinos for a reason. It's not, of course, we all think we're cuter and all of those things. It's not that. It's effectiveness, just like in the private sector. You know, this is a low-risk, high-yield investment. You know, and in my field, we talk a lot about outcomes. All of the trends show it. In fact, I mean, let me make a parallel to media. In media, you know, you look at what it costs, you know, for half a minute advertising in Telemundo or, you know, other Spanish language media, and you look at the market. The input is small, the output is huge. So obviously, there are issues of perception that are getting in the way. And so one of the things that my organization, Hispanics in Philanthropy, which, by the way, encompasses many of my colleagues here on the panel and many of you out there. One of the things that we did this year is we published a narrative of 30 Latino givers. There are some of these books outside, so that folks like Arnoldo Avalos and folks like Lourdes Miranda, you know, whose quote here says, "I vowed that I would never, ever be indifferent to human suffering." These leaders, whose names are not household names and who are not, you know, on sources for the news on CNN or on, you know, many stations, so that this narrative begins to redefine who we are. You know, we may have been poor, you know, our parents may have been refugees or campesinos, but we're people of internal abundance. And I think with some strategic effectiveness, we can turn that into a down payment on investments in our communities that are led by us, that are guided by us, and that at the same time put us at the table so that we can exercise leadership over those investments. And what I would say to all of you philanthropists out there is, you know, let's work together on helping foundations to be more diverse, to have more trustees and staff that are Latino, and especially to have more CEOs. There are several positions open in California on some of those larger foundations, and I'm hoping that some of you will apply for them.
Yep. Moving on to the second question. There's a few questions, so I'm going to ask you to...
Be short.
Sure.
Yeah.
Reports show that the country will benefit if an immigration reform is passed. What do business need to do to put pressure on both political parties so we can see results this year? Please tell us what you think.
I wish companies would start withholding political contributions to policymakers until they start doing their job for what we send them to Washington to do. Lukewarm response out there, okay. But that's what business needs to do. I mean, I am very grateful to all the companies who have spoken out in favor of comprehensive immigration reform. AT&T, Walmart, Southwest, everybody who has had the courage to stand up and take a position. Okay, we're at a position now where the only people who really are opposed to immigration reform are truly the nativists and the haters. You know, the ones who are opposed, even the ones who won't vote for it, support it. It's all political right now. What we need to do is to use what leverage we have to motivate policymakers to do the right thing. And frankly, I think the one leverage that's left is what policymakers really rely on, and that's contributions. Mm-hmm. And I think we gotta get them where it hurts and where it matters to them at this point.
And I think a corollary of that is, you know, we as philanthropists and our corporate grant-making programs and our foundations have to stay in the game for the long haul. We can't, you know, invest. I mean, I hear, you know, foundations saying, you know what, you know, it's dead on arrival, it's not going to happen this year. We have payout, let's invest elsewhere. No. You know, this is, and when immigration reform, when comprehensive immigration reform passes, there's still going to be a lot of work to do. Right. So we're not talking about, you know, sort of short-term gains and that's it. I think we should be investing in the infrastructure, in these organizations that are here and hundreds of others that are going to be a part of getting out the vote, that are going to be a part of, of implementing immigration reform. And, it's not about, the next 6 months. It's about the future of this country, and we can either invest in it now, and make sure that we get the results in the next 3 to 5 years, or that we drag it out for another 20 years or 10 years, and then everybody suffers.
I would like to add that I think almost every corporate 500 company is very aggressive with their employee internal communications. And I think this is a great opportunity with immigration reform to take this as an opportunity to educate your own workforce about the contributions that undocumented and all immigrants are making for your companies. You do that with educating so many of us about why you're outsourcing as opposed to investing in the education force here in the United States. Take this as an opportunity to educate those employees, because that goes to the vote, it goes to the individual contributions. And if you truly value the immigrant spirit that's here in the United States, I think that's a really good step forward.
I just saw last week a documentary titled Underwater Dreams. Has anybody seen it yet? It's narrated by Michael Peña, and it's the story of the team of undocumented students at a Phoenix high school who built a robot, an underwater robot, that ended up beating a team from MIT. And it's going to be, in addition to the documentary, it's actually being turned into a feature motion picture. Think of Hoosiers, but for Latinos building robot.
Great pitch.
It is. And I saw it, and I don't think there was a dry eye in the house towards the end, because what you see is, it's an amazing story. It's just a tremendous story of these kids who beat the odds and built this underwater robot that did things that the team from MIT, with all of their resources and all of their, the things that they had through their whole life, and beat them. But what was so painful was to see the wasted resource of these 4 high school kids who were undocumented, who after high school, just their paths were stopped because they couldn't get the funding to go to college, or when one got his degree, he couldn't get a job. And he ended up going to the Army and becoming an Army Ranger. And to me, that just doesn't make any sense. And I think to Americans, and one of the things that we're seeing from, again, looking at it just from the perspective of how do you help students, because we help these students as much as we can. By the way, we are now, HSF now is open to DACA students in terms of the scholarships, and there hasn't been one funder, HSF funder, that has, because we've asked them, so all of the funders that are here have agreed to have their scholarships open to DACA students as well. But there's still so much more, and the thing that I see is the additional resources coming in. So it's almost like people are adjusting to the fact that the folks in Washington are they're not doing their job, but we still got to figure out how to make it work. And so my sort of call to action for people is to let dreamers and undocumented students know about the resources that are out there to help them navigate the path to higher education for those that are there. Again, there's lots of challenges, but I know that there are literally hundreds of thousands of kids that we need to help. There was a fund that was just started by the Graham family. Henry Munoz out of San Antonio I think it's a $25 million fund that they put together just for dreamers. I know that there's other scholarship programs, and we're putting those resources out there for them. But to me, it's just a waste of human capital and human resource. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. I would encourage you to see that movie. I would take, if anybody is opposed to immigration reform, take them to go see that movie, because there's no way. And by the way, they're showing that movie. It's an interesting group. It's the woman who did Waiting for Superman. Was that the movie? And Jeb Bush, the son.
George P.
Yeah, no, not George P. The other. He has George P. and then Jeb. But they've asked the question, who are you showing this to? And they're actually showing it to folks in D.C., evangelicals, and so it's an interesting perspective. But I think, anyways, I think there's things that we can do to let the students that are on the edge in terms of going and pursuing their higher education to know what resources are out there for them.
Let me add, it's, within the Hispanic IT Executive Council, we're very pro-immigration, and we're really proud of one of our members, the CIO of Facebook, Timothy Campos, who's Dominicano, and they're really behind with Mark Zuckerberg, this Forward.us campaign, really helping being pro-immigration. I think also in the wisdom of Carlos having me come here is also to maybe share with you a different opinion from the Midwest to California, because it's also important to understand how some of the country views the Hispanics. And they look at what's happening in Europe, and they see this immigration not as a good thing. And don't shoot the messenger here, by the way. But it's okay to bring up some differing opinions, that I see, that I encounter, and I challenge those different opinions. But they view a lot of what's happened in the Portugal, Spain, Greece, Italy. They've seen a lot of incoming immigration from Africa, and it's put a serious dent in their economy. And the conservatives, in their belief of being taxed enough already, don't want that additional burden at this point. And that's the challenge that we as Hispanics need to educate and show America and show our political leaders that there are great ones within us and that we are producers to the economy and not takers to the economy. It's education to our children, and it's education to the rest of America that is paramount to get this across the board.
Now we keep hearing over and over that Latinos are the majority in the state. And a person that I know always tells me, we can be the majority, but that doesn't mean much if we continue to be the lowest paid. What do you think about this statement?
Well, in our report, The Economic Status of Latinas that Hope did a year ago, at that time, some of the numbers showed that Latinas were making 42 cents per dollar, as opposed to a white male that was obviously making the dollar, and women were making closer to 60 to 70 cents on it. There's a lot of statistics that show that Latinas are at the lower wage earners, which is a challenge for our community for a couple of reasons. One being, obviously, Latinas are a strong economic engine for our community. Most families are in the Latino community have both the Latina and the Latino working. And of course, there's a lot of single parents and single mothers in our community. So we have to really ensure three things that we found from the report that's not going to be startling to anyone. One, that our educational system cannot be failing, as it has been. Not only getting us up through high school and going on to higher education, but for those that choose not to go on to higher education, that our community colleges are very strong. And here in California, for a Latina to go on to higher education, 87% of them that are going on to higher education will start at the community college system. So that system has to be a serving institution for Latinos and Latinas. It has to ensure that either they're going on to a technical career that's going to be very beneficial for them, or they're getting transferred out. And that's not happening here in California. So we've got a lot of work to do when it comes to our higher education systems. The other piece when it comes to wage disparity, we've got to be very honest about it, is discrimination. There is no ifs, ands about it. We still see it that people, Latinas or women in general, for the equal pay, for the same job, are making less money. And I love this conversation that people kind of sidetracked into about, it's because we're bad negotiators. Enough. Do not blame the victim here. This is about discrimination. Yeah, we can go in and ask for more money, but this is about systematic change and about corporate America making sure, and our government and everyone paying out to make sure that we get equal pay for equal the job that we do. It's not about just because we didn't ask for more money. Yeah, that's maybe a small part of it, but it doesn't make up the almost 60 cents difference that we're getting per the dollar. And I may feel a little bit passionate about that.
I'm going to be a little sort of contrarian. There was a statistic that I saw at the beginning or middle of last year that was pretty startling. it said that 69% of Hispanic high school graduates were going directly into college nationally. Now, 69% of Hispanic high school graduates, and our dropout rates actually declined, but it's still, compared to the general population, so for example, compared to whites, it was 64%. So there is something happening with young people that is encouraging, that they're understanding. Now granted, the path is, I like to call it sort of an obstacle course, because there are lots of obstacles in front of our young people. But somehow, a lot of them are managing to sort of navigate the path. And it's clear that there is now a link, and maybe it's sinking in, because there is no way around it. Individuals who have a college degree, whether it's an AA or a BA or some form of technical training, are going to earn more per year over their lifetime than anybody else. And that is something that we have to continue to inculcate into our young people, that they need to understand it. Now, the difficult part of that is if you have a system that doesn't really prepare them, you can believe that all you want, and some kids are going to make it by sheer ganas and force. So again, back to the point, while that is a heartening statistic, it also raises the issue of the importance of making sure that the institutional things that are in place in terms of our educational system are the focus of our policymakers and our local elected officials as well, to make those perform better.
Let me just add, it's this problem that we're talking about is not exclusive to the Hispanic community. It's a problem across America. Just in the 1990s, students in the science, technology, engineering, and mathematics field were at a 14% attendance rate, in the sense of going into those types of programs. As recently as 2013, that number has dropped to 8%. So it's terrible. We're going actually in the wrong direction across America, regardless of the color. So it is a challenge to almost the institutions, but I'm one that doesn't believe in government can change people. I believe parents and people change people. And it's as simple as this. How many people in this room have a smartphone, probably on their hand as they're holding it? Yeah, almost all. But it's our duty as parents to educate our children and ask them, how is it that they're communicating with their best friends across the city, across the country, and sometimes around the world instantly, and playing all sorts of games on it in a community-based model with kids. My son plays a game called Clash of Clans, 13 years old, with one of his best friends who happens to live in Hong Kong, in real time. We need to inspire our kids as parents. Remember, individual responsibility. As parents, to drive our kids to understand how technology works and get them excited about it, because there's jobs out there, and to study, computer science, to study their math, and instead of letting them play Xbox and let them go around to educate themselves, because it's a global economy. The world is flat, and I can assure you, there's a kid in China and a kid in India working twice as hard to get that job. So parents need to be responsible versus counting on government to tell you what to be responsible for.
Can I just add real quickly that the one place that there is not as large of a wage discrepancy between our women and men is in the tech field. So, and I think that's a really good, all pun intended, ray of hope to get involved in technology. And you don't have to think about technology, about actually creating the smartphone. If you're in finance, you need to get into technology. Yep. We were just talking about how every corporation is redefining themselves as a technology company now. So there is a lot of good opportunities for women, specifically Latinas, to get involved in technology, and to, this is a great time to, if you have the finance background, whatever background, it's a great time to maybe think about a new career transition, because for whatever reason, they seem a little bit more enlightened when it comes to wage.
Can I move on to the next question, because I would like to get more in depth in regards to that. Poverty levels in the Latino community is obviously very high, and some of you have mentioned education and also participating in politics that could put us up to speed. And I think that most of us would agree with that. But our income level, for sure, is a big obstacle when it comes to education and the participation in the political progress or process. Other than applying for grants in social services, how do you think the Latino community can access good paying jobs?
Okay, can I just add, I'm sorry, I have a kind of, other than applying for grants and government help, that starts with that's what we're doing. And that's not what we're doing. And we got to be very clear about that. We've got to change that perception that Latinos are here to take. That's not what we're doing. We're starting small businesses at a record number, especially Latinas. We're managing more than 2 jobs in our families. I think probably all of us have probably parents that have worked more than 2 jobs to get us through school. So let's just start with saying, why aren't Latinos more involved in government? And change that question around, because the fact of the matter is that that's not the reality. You know, the largest number of the smallest number of people that signed up for ACA was almost the Latino community, right? And even though they've had the most to benefit from it. So let's just change that around and say, why aren't Latinos more engaged in government? And start from, that would be how I would pose that question.
You know, and I have a different perspective on applying for scholarships and grants. In fact, I don't think we apply enough, you know. And oftentimes, if we're declined, we don't come back. And so I think we need to, you know, be applying for more. Be asking, you know, for more. You know, many of you in corporate America, you know, the foundations, you know, funds comes either out of marketing, but some, you know, can come out of tax-exempt dollars, okay? I mean, the Bill and Melinda Gates, that's a big tax-exempt organization. And so I think we have to be more assertive around, you know, making our case and making our case on what we can deliver, on the outcomes that we can deliver. There's plenty of data to do that. I also agree with you, Helen, you know, that this narrative that somehow, you know, we're here to take and, you know, we don't do. No, I think the solutions are not one solution. Certainly policy and government is a solution, but I think it's a combination. It's a combination of 10 different items on the menu. I mean, I was raised on rice and beans. We know that's more protein. We need like 10 different ways, including developing the infrastructure of the Latino nonprofits. I serve on a board of an organization that is a women's cooperative that generates small businesses, mostly for undocumented women. There are hundreds of those in California, and I'm sure, you know, across the country. I think there's a number of solutions, but there is not one magic bullet.
Latino community is very diverse, as you all know, here in California. We have people that have immigrated from many Latin American countries. We also have many U.S.-born Latinos. My experience tells me that U.S.-born Latinos in general tend to separate themselves from Latinos immigrants. What is your opinion on that topic?
Interesting.
Can't avoid Latinos in California.
I was gonna say.
No, I think what we're witnessing is just the great American experience, and where Latinos are integrating, and this country is changing Latinos as much as Latinos are changing this country. You know, we are part and parcel of the future of the United States, and the future of the United States is part and parcel of us. And I think it's just a natural process that happens in terms of integration into society. What I fear, or what keeps me up at night when I think about that process, is about the generations that don't make it. Right. And that we do have a segment of the Latino population that does not have an immigrant experience anymore, but they also have not succeeded and lived what we would call the American dream yet. And it's that segment of the population, I think, that is most at risk that we don't talk about because we focus so much on the immigrant experience and the most vulnerable being those who are undocumented. And then we celebrate the people who have succeeded. But I think one of the challenges is what about those folks who are not succeeding, who speak only English, who are not benefiting from all the policy changes we want to see to benefit immigrants, whether it's DACA or immigration reform. You know, I know who these people are because some of them are my cousins whose grandparents came from Mexico and they themselves have not yet experienced that American dream, and we're not fashioning, in my opinion, significant policy changes to figure out how do we lift up their boat. And that's what I find most troubling.
Let me jump in there. As somebody who back in 2000 got called for the first time a coconut, I was struggling with that. Like, is that a compliment or an insult?
If you're from Puerto Rico, that's a compliment.
Yeah, and I asked them, well, what is it? They go, Honor, you may be brown on the outside, but you're white on the inside. And I'm like, oh, it's just like the African American community has their Uncle Toms, people that succeed, and then they move out. And they may move out of the barrio, as we say. And, you know, and I said, but, you know, I was kind of I looked at it as a little bit of an attack because I've succeeded as an individual. And that is something that, you know, I've leveraged that in a very positive way. And I say I'm proud to be a coconut because it gives me the point to show the others that they can do it as individuals and individual responsibility. You know, we see that. I mean, we were very lucky to have our lunch speaker, Eduardo Tobon, over there. So shout out for my fellow Colombian. Yeah. But it is also something, you know, who's made it, you know, on his own. And it is something that, you know, even in the crowd, we have another Colombian, Diana, here from Charles Schwab, that is doing, you know, these partnerships with other companies in the Bay Area, you know, to bring companies together to help, you know, create leadership. And it's being done by individuals. I'm always, and I've seen too much public policy in view of the government connecting our community. I always never see that succeeding. It's about individual responsibility. And that's what we Hispanics are. And here's a simple fact. According to the Pew Hispanic Research Center, of the 53 million Hispanics in the United States, 62% of them are Mexican Americans. But then you put the barrier and you go right on their website and you add college degree, Mexican Americans drop right to the bottom. So that is something that shows a South American Hispanic influence, which is about individual responsibility and working together as families and taking care of each other. And we need to bring that into the Mexican American community because what happens? They've come here as doing transactional jobs, very family orientated. They take care of each other. I even heard a story today from an executive at AT&T how parents still don't want their children to go to college, even in this day and time. It's astounding to hear that, but it's still happening. It's a culture change in our community to push our kids going forward and let them leave the house. Let them not work in the family restaurant. Let them not work in the family business. Let them go out and explore, and don't count on government to help you with that.
I would say that, again, from my perspective, having looked at sort of the numbers and sort of anecdotally as well, that we are doing that. I mean, we really are. And so part of it, and I think it was stated before, is it's also changing the perception. I'm going to ask you a question. What percentage of Latino youth in Los Angeles County are in gangs? What? And anybody want to guess? Throw a number out. 3%. How much? 3. 3? Anybody else? 8. Anybody else? Go higher. 20? Higher. 15.
72.
And look, and I've been, and I started doing. I started doing this when I was mayor in 1992, when I would go to speak to junior high schools. And there wasn't a junior high school that I went to that didn't say higher than 50%. Okay? So I would say, okay, so that means that half of you over here are in a gang and half of you over here are not. They'd say, no, that's not us. I said, well, that's not how statistics work. And so I started with the police department, the sheriff's department, went to the California has all these statistics. It's all tracked. I mean, it's simple math. You take the number of known gang members, and there's hardcore and associates, and it's all very, very specific. And then you take the population and the ages of where kids are, and what you get is less than 1%. And so the point is that we have perceptions that are created about our community, not surprisingly, and those things are repeated. And guess what? Not only does the general public believe it, but we believe it.
That's right.
And so part of the challenge is getting our own young people to believe something different. And anecdotally, and also from some recent surveys, I have some good news to report, which is young people, and you alluded to this, Arturo, young people actually now, because of the sheer numbers, are beginning to impact the culture of the US. So there's a little bit more, sort of call it brown pride. I don't know if you've noticed, but it's subtle, but it's impacting our culture, it's impacting music, it's impacting, not enough in terms of entertainment and media, but it's beginning to happen. And the key to that is that phenomenon also has to include the thing that Andre talked about, which is the importance of education, the importance of striving to get a degree and to have a degree in your home, and one of the things that we say, one of our sort of dreams is to have a degree in every household, every Latino household. So those are the things that we have to ensure that we begin to put in, and there's organizations that are working on those things. NALEO, through its tremendous I call you a distribution network, right? Because imagine if you can get information to Arturo about some of these positive things that can then be disseminated to all of the elected officials, the council members, the school board members, the mayors, that they can post on their website, right? To share this information with the positive things that are happening. And so I think there's existing ways that we can work together, and we have to be very careful not to get caught in that trap, because it's really easy to get caught in that trap.
Before you say or add to that, please start thinking about the questions. We're going to start Q&A right after.
Sure. So I think that, to your point, Fidel, the narrative is very important. So let me share with you a narrative. I was born in the beautiful island of Puerto Rico. 3 years old, my mother went to Detroit, Michigan, because she could get a job at GM, where she met my father, my stepfather. And so I was a Puerto Rican in Detroit, Michigan, then moved out to Westland, if you know the Detroit area, which is basically out of a high school of 2,000 kids, there was only 4 Latino families. I did my master's degree on the migrant farm workers in Michigan. Ended up in Los Angeles because a man that was running a public affairs shop at the time that I met said, I need to hire a Latina. And he's in Los Angeles and he's hiring a Puerto Rican from Michigan. I'm like, okay, fine, I need to get to LA. I'll take advantage of that. But all this to say is, in that narrative, regardless if it was the Puerto Rican community that embraced my family in Detroit, the Caucasian community in Westland, the migrant farm workers of Grand Rapids, or the vibrant community of Latinos here in California, I saw no difference. So I don't buy into a narrative that there is differences because of where we come from. What I see is the value of family. I see the value of hard work. I see families and parents, especially of immigrants, my mom, who did a lot of sacrifice and worked a lot of jobs to ensure that I had a good education. I think that's our narrative. And our narrative is, when our parents are frightened of what's out there of higher education at times, it's because they're being protective, because this country, for the most part, has not been welcoming. I know that was my case. So yeah, we can be those outliers that we break some of these narratives and say we are going to take some of those risks. We can't always be in the protective cocoons of our barrios, and we've got to get out there. I think all of us have probably experienced that. But we have to be the first ones to champion the positives of our narratives and to ensure that we're seen, because when I'm in California, they don't see me as a Puerto Rican, they see me as a Latina. When I was in Westland, they saw me as Greek or Italian. So that's why I always cut my last name Torres. And my husband happens to be Peruvian, so I love you all. So I think that's very important, to get our narrative of hard work, family, and understanding that oftentimes those voices that our young women are experiencing, because we have a young women's group in Hope, that says, stay close home, is because this country and our institutions have not been welcoming to us, and we can change that.
Did I leave anybody out?
That's okay, I'll pass. Let's go to the next one.
Okay, we're going to go to Q&A.
Yeah. Great.
Okay, we have people. Can we go to the gentleman right there? He's there, right there. Thank you.
So question for the panel. I think you talked, Diana, about philanthropy, and
yes.
Fidel also talked about the importance of reaching out to more, the opportunity that exists to reach out to those college students that majority are not necessarily getting help. Perhaps you guys can expand on the use of technology and some of the things that maybe these days we have to make a dent, because those cents and dollars can count and get the engagement of the community in a way that wasn't there before because technology was not allowing for that to happen. So if you can speak a little bit to that.
Go ahead.
So that's a softball. Thank you. One of the reasons that I came to HSF a year ago from my career in finance was because of the need to knowing that we needed to increase the individual donor base at HSF. And I'm a firm believer that Latinos give. And it's sort of counterintuitive. You say, well, where's the proof? We obviously give to the church, but Univision, one of their biggest buyers of media time, and I think it might be even for Telemundo, is St. Jude. And I don't know if you've ever seen those commercials on the infomercials for St. Jude on the weekends, but they're raising money for the cure for cancer and for young people, and they are raising money like mad in our community. The same goes for World Hunger and other organizations that you wouldn't consider to be Latino, but our community is being generous, and in amounts like $5 and $10 and $20. And so technology is absolutely critical to that. And I'm going to do a commercial. You can right now, or at whatever point you want, you can type in www.hsf.net on your browser on your phone. There was a report that came out that said 85% of nonprofits do not have responsive design on their websites. And so without responsive design, it almost makes this useless if you want to surf the web or if you want to interact with an organization. Fortunately, that's one of the things that we've built out. We built out a complete new technology platform that makes it easy. And you'll notice other things too. For example, if you want to donate to HSF, the friction that used to be there or that's there in many of the interactions that you might have with nonprofits that may get you frustrated are gone. The chief technology officer for the Obama campaign is our chief advisor on what we're doing with all of the technology on our website. So the frictionless donate button on our page is exactly what it was for the Obama campaign, and they raised $690 million from 1.2 million donors. And so we've just launched, and it's not been public, but our 833 campaign. So what is the 833 campaign? What we're saying is donate $8.33 a month to HSF to help us fund more scholarships. And 833 is really simple. It's $100 divided by 12. And so 833 is what, it's a latte and a muffin. It's a ticket to the movie. We had some focus groups, and I'm not kidding, 2 mothers in 2 different groups called it the Latino Netflix. And it's a month. I mean, it's $8.33 a month. And the idea that leveraging technology, using social media, this is the de facto computer for our community. We over-index on mobile technology. 12% of our students last year completed their scholarship application on their smartphone. And that was on an application that did not have responsive design. We anticipate that that number is probably going to go to 30 to 40% within the next year. And that eventually when Apple makes their screens bigger, and same thing with all the Droid phones, that a lot of us, Microsoft just put their Windows on iPads. So that's where it's going, and I think it's important for all of our organizations to share that information, and I'm happy with what we've learned, to share that with anybody else who's interested. I know Aset is on the leading edge too with the Google Hangout and the app and all of those things. Those are things that we need to do as organizations to reach out to the broader masses in our community and frankly in our country. One of the things that was really interesting for me was to see how many people who were not Latino that donate to HSF. And there's a lot of people in Nebraska and Iowa and Montana and Michigan and North Carolina and every other state in between that give to organizations like HSF and others. So,
in fact,
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
In fact, we've got a term for that. We like to say you don't have to be Hispanic to be hip, to be a hip donor.
That's good.
And just, kudos to you, Fidel, for the 833 campaign. I told him, I'm definitely signing up for the 833 campaign. A couple of things that HIP is doing, we have also built out our technology, our platform. We're doing a soft launch of a website called HIP Give. We have funded over 600 organizations throughout the United States, about $40 million. And what we're doing is we're curating campaigns. So for example, for Mother's Day, we have curated a campaign that includes 25 different mostly women's organizations. And we're helping those organizations to use crowdsourcing, which is something that they had not used. Incidentally, do you know how many crowdsourcing sites there are?
How many?
Over 150. Do you know how many focus on Latinos?
None.
Okay. I mean, this is it, probably, the organizations that we run. And what's important, yes, the money is important, but you know what else? The participation. The $5, the $10, the $100, that participation translates into muscle. It translates into civic activism. It translates into analytics that you can use, in your corporations. Translates into markets. So I can't say enough, how important that is. And by the way, to come back to the issue of the narrative, I think, a year from now, we're going to have more data about Latino leadership and giving as a result of these platforms that we're now
I'm going to say one thing,
launching.
and I apologize.
Yeah.
You just reminded me. We launched the new website on September 1, 2013. As of last Friday, we had 170,000 unique user profiles that had been created on MyHSF. So talk about data and analytics. It's tremendous. And so there is a lot that can be gained by using technology. Just said that our CIO is going to be joining high tech. She used to be at Sony, and I think you were trying to get her as a member there, but now I'm going to make sure she joins. But yeah, it's that number alone is just blown us away in terms of how people are engaging.
No, go ahead.
We're going to move to another question. I want to put a plug in for the hook. You forgot about the hook on your 833.
So General Motors has donated a Chevy Sonic to help us have our alumni and our scholars update their profiles. And so that's been incredibly helpful. We're going to be giving away a car to an HSF alum or scholar. And it's very exciting. So if you haven't done it and you're an HSF scholar or alum, go and update your profile on MyHSF. So thank you, Alma. And Ken, is Ken here?
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Mauricio Pinchero. I work with Consumers Energy in Michigan. So first I wanted to acknowledge and thank the panelists for all your hard work and dedication to the cause. So I appreciate everything that you do. My question is more around the Black community. It seems like they have a very unified voice when it comes to policy, politics, corporate America. What can we learn from that community that will help us in the future?
Well, I think you hit on one key word there, scenes. And, I've had the opportunity to work in this field now going on 30 years. And, people will ask me, how come Latinos are always fighting against each other? Why can't you guys get your act together? I'm talking about other Latinos. And then as I would commiserate with my allies and my partners in the African American community, and say, well, same thing with us.
Yeah.
And I go and talk to our Asian, counterparts, and like, yeah, and more often than not, people look at us as Latinos and say, we want to be like the Latino community because you guys are so unified. So I think a lot of it really is perception as where these communities are. Now, there's one thing that I will say about the African American community that they do, and I think it's to their benefit and also has been to their detriment, is that they do vote as a bloc.
Mm-hmm.
So they vote as a bloc, and overwhelmingly Democratic in national elections. And I think that has been a benefit for them when Democrats are in power. And I think it's also been a detriment to them that they're not. And I think there's a benefit to us in that in many respects we are somewhat of a swing electorate. So, for what it's worth, I think the operative word was that it seems.
Mm-hmm. And if I can add, I think the African American community had an infrastructure of organizations, the black churches, the civil rights organizations, the fraternities and sororities, so that, there was an infrastructure that in a way was like, the wheels on the car, on that GM car, that moved the movement forward. I think we have some of that. Certainly MALDEF, HSF, NALEO, the NCLR, all of those national organizations, but we still need more. We need, a good solid infrastructure, and technology helps us to deliver it. If you go on our HIP Give after, the end of April, if you go on our HIP Give platform, if you're a small local organization in Oakland, California, or in Chula Vista, or somewhere, you have access to national donors. You have access to donors in Detroit and in Homestead, Florida, and in Chicago and other places. So there are ways to develop infrastructure through technology as well that we haven't had, and I think that's a lesson from the civil rights movement.
You're here. This organization, HACR, is, in my view, the key. And I love what and I say we're because I feel like I'm a part of this. The young sort of corporate leaders, and then the sort of middle, kind of just below the C-suite executives, and that training process is what the African American community did a generation ago and 2 generations ago. People like Vernon Jordan, who quietly, sat on corporate boards and helped build the organization, the ELC, and those kinds of things are the sort of below the radar, no one really sees, but that have a huge impact. And so if you're here as a young sort of corporate leader, or you're a middle manager and on the way up, the important thing that I think that needs to continue to happen is that mentorship, and that we need to keep bringing up young people. And I view HSF as the beginning of that process. We got them when they're in college, and then we hand them off to Nashimba and Alpha and HACR and others to help build their careers. Because that is one of the things that's going to help our community. The sad reality is that our net worth is not where it needs to be to have the kind of impact. And you ask any one of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus what the percentage of Latinos, or the money that they raise that comes from Latinos. What is that, Arturo? It's less than 10%?
Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. And so we wonder why sometimes things don't go our way. We have to build wealth. That's just another part of what we do. Sorry.
We have like 5 minutes, but one more question.
Hi, Kirk Whistler, Latino Print Network, and we publish the National Latino and American Indian Scholarship Directory. Great presentation, lots of great information. One of the key problems I see is the increasing difference in college between Latinas and Latinos. And it's just accelerating. We saw it first happen in the African American community, and now we're seeing it not only in the Latino, but the white community also. What do you see as potential answers?
2/3 I'm sorry, 2/3 of our scholarships go to females, to women. And that's progress, but what we see is a steady decline. There is a crisis amongst males. And so one of the things that we're doing is we actually are now, in some ways, doing affirmative action for men, for young Latinos, and starting early to try to reach them, to get them on the path. We're creating a position called the Talent Scout, to go out and find like young Latinos that are talented, and both Latinas and Latinos, and help them continue on that path. So it was staggering for me to see that, and it's continued. So that's something that no one really would have thought of, but the president just started his My Brother's Keeper, and it is absolutely a critical issue.
Absolutely. What I would add to that is that from My Brother's Keeper, what's interesting about that too is Hope's involved in that. Yeah. From a Latina perspective, obviously I have twin boys, and so we're raising these young men, so we want to ensure that they have all the opportunities, the same opportunities, and an organization like Hope is all about parity for all genders. So with that in mind, but we also have to look at the realities here. There's two realities I think that's very important, and that one of them goes to My Brother's Keeper, is calling out Latino role models to step up and really mentor. I think that's incredibly important. Second is, talk about institutional and systematic changes that needs to happen. The fact of the matter is more of our young men, either African American or Latino, are tracked more into much more punitive situations in a younger age. So in a lot of California schools, you have zero tolerance policies, that you do one bad thing, and which could sound like a really bad thing, and you're already discounted and you're not going to be graduating from high school. You're going to be on a track that's probably going to put you more into the criminal justice system. So we have to look at these policies that were not around when the majority did not look like us. These policies just came about in the last 10 years. So there's a responsibility of us stepping up to the plate and mentoring and ensuring that these young men and women have opportunities. And then we have to be smart. When there's a private prison system that goes to governors and asks the governors to guarantee a 90% rate of their population, or otherwise they're not going to do business with them, there's some real instrumental money exchange happening here that tracks our young men. And we've just got to be truthful about that. But there is a lot of personal responsibility that we have to also take as a community.
We're going to have to wrap it up. You were going to say something.
Oh, I loved My Brother's Keeper program. It's important for the Hispanic as well as the African American community. I found it amazingly if you watch when President Obama got off the stage, the first two people he shook hands with that helped him with that, one was Colin Powell, and the other one was Bill O'Reilly. Because it was that kind of push about individual responsibility and responsibility of parents, and I can't drive that enough. Responsibility of parents about education and being home for your children. That is what makes this country great. And we've seen that with education. There's lots of jobs out there, and that really is the economic power of the Hispanic community.
Thank you very much. Thank you for being here. Thank you to the panelists. Please give them a round of applause. Arturo Vargas, Diana Campoamor, Fidel Vargas, and Helen Torres. Please. A round of applause. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, members of the panel. And now, Jason.
Yes, thank you all for a great session. Am I turned on? Yes. Just a quick reminder before we thank them one more time. We're going to start upstairs at 4:30 with the CEO series with the CEO of...
Mi nombre es Rose Estrada y yo soy dueña de Vision Electric Wholesale. Estamos localizados en Alhambra, California. Mi familia ha estado en ese tipo de negocio por más de 30 años.
We serve electrical contractors, general contractors, and business entities such as cities and governments. My name is Bernie Estrada. I was actually introduced to the business by my wife, Rose, we felt there was a need for a Latino-owned electrical wholesale house.
Hola, Robert.
Hi.
¿Cómo estás ahora?
Bien, bien, gracias.
Bien. ¿Hicieron una orden?
It's important for a business to have a website because that's the way you're going to connect. I wanted a website where people would be comfortable, but I also wanted them to be able to get to the information quickly, such as our location, what time we open, phone numbers, and our line card. The Get Your Business Online initiative was extremely important to our company because it really kind of opened our eyes. I was able to better leverage the website and learn more about what we can do. The internet and having a website gives us a level playing field. Having a presence on Google has affected our revenue by 18%. So on average, that can turn into anywhere from 8 to 12 sales per month.
Can we go over the week how the number of visitors fluctuates?
Sure. The Google Analytics actually helped me understand conversion rates and where our business is coming from. We were able to hire more employees. To date, we've hired 3 more employees that have actually helped our business grow.
Ponían electricidad y lighting, y cuando yo salía en la primer página de Google, eso es algo que me ayudó fuerte en el negocio.
With everything that we use today, with the website, with the growing number of employees, with the relationship we have with Google, with their products, we're going to be able to build something solid for our kids to have one day.
We're here to celebrate you today and the web evangelism that you've been carrying out in your various communities, leading in innovation, growth, prosperity, and showing how the web can be a great tool for this growth in your communities.
My experience at the Accelerate with Google Summit has been absolutely fabulous. It was a collection of both local and national thought leaders in diversity, as well as thought leaders in technology.
So the summit's been great. I mean, it's brought forth people from various organizations from across the country to share their ideas, to see some of the things they're doing in common and see what they can learn from each other. So it's been a great day of information.
Today, we're proud to work with 75 partners who are impacting entrepreneurs in over 115 countries. A few of our partners I see in this room. And the outcomes that we're able to achieve together, we believe that diversity can't happen in a silo. It has to happen across our entire global network.
I love seeing a lot of partners, a lot of Googlers that I work with online to finally see them and touch them. I love that. I've met presidents and CEOs of other minority-focused business associations. I've met national business association presidents. I've also had the opportunity to hear today from the CFO of Google, which was really a great experience, really just to hear from the top.
Google is just not a conventional company. Inclusion is inclusion. It's not a quota. It's a mindset.
The CFO of Google was great. It's interesting to see what he said about the fact that everyone has a diversity story.
There's actually a diversity story in all of us. And that's the really fundamental issue. And in fact, our responsibility is actually to turn this completely upside down, to make it completely blind. It's all about celebration, not exclusion. And these are the principles by which we run at Google.
A diverse organization is going to solve problems better, we're going to be more innovative, and that's the lifeblood of Google. It's critical for us to stay relevant.
It starts with all of us. It starts with mindsets, and it starts with thinking big.
If we look at the data, we can consistently understand that diversity always leads to better outcomes.
I hope that with just these few words, I give you a sense of the optimism that's at Google, our values, and our ability to think big.
In a very nice way, gave us the big picture of what's happening at Google. And as an entrepreneur, to see a large company like Google do stuff at grassroots levels was very encouraging for us.
My favorite part about being an Accelerate with Google partner is just how much love Google shows to its partners. I mean, it's really just been an amazing experience, and it's great to be connected to such an innovative company that really wants to work to bridge the digital divide, connect with minority communities, and do so in ways that many companies might not necessarily be willing to go that deep into your organization.
At the summit, I've learned how Google makes it a priority to work with partners. Now I know that we can bring other partners within our community to come and work with Google and, amplify that message to their own respective communities.
You know, I've learned that there's a lot of organizations out there really focused on educating different audiences on the power of technology and growing their business and growing their lives, and it's given me more encouragement to continue to do what I'm doing.
What we can be doing as evangelists to really help connect people to the web using Google applications and using Google products that are really important for us to be able to take these organizations and individuals to the next level.
This is how it starts. It doesn't need to be tens and tens and tens of thousands. It starts with people like us, and we can make a huge difference.
One of the greatest things about being able to leave here this afternoon and to go back to our community is that the programs that we learned here with Accelerate through Google Partners is to be able to make sure that the technology is now leveling the playing field.
Every small, medium business, which is the real heart of so much innovation, with the right tools can be incredibly successful. The whole world is yours.
We are walking away not just feeling up for today, but really committed to what we're going to do next.